This is the Insta360 X4, and this is the Osmo Pocket 3. Should you invest in an action camera like this that can shoot in a 360-degree sphere, or invest in a camera gimbal stabilizer like the Osmo Pocket 3? The X4 is in stock and ready to ship pretty much everywhere, whereas the Pocket 3 just fell back into that backorder status, and that's almost 8 months after it was released. Does that mean the Osmo Pocket 3 is that popular? Or did DJI just not make enough? But the real question you might be asking yourself is which one of these two cameras is better for what you are doing? Let's find out. Today, we will be looking at their image quality and different use cases. We will look at their differences from a real-world perspective so that we can figure out which one is right for you. As a video creator, achieving the highest image quality is of top priority, especially for beginners who don't really care about the specs. They just want to open up the box and start shooting. While specs are important, the cameras themselves do have limitations and thresholds that we want to uncover. I'm not concerned with what the manufacturers of both of these cameras have to say. I'm interested in how they actually perform when you're out filming in the real world. Oh, and by the way, this video is not being sponsored by Insta360 or DJI. In fact, it's not sponsored by anyone. Neither camera company sent these cameras to me. I obtained these through my own resource, so there's no bias here. If you haven't had the opportunity to use either of these cameras and are interested in understanding how their video file sizes and clips will perform on your editing rigs, I have uploaded some project files for you to download at no cost. This will allow you to review some of the footage comparisons from this video without being affected by YouTube compression that you may be seeing right now. I'll leave a link to that footage in the description. Also, if you own or intend to purchase the X4 or the Osmo Pocket 3, I created a course covering various aspects, including shooting in diverse lighting environments, setting them both up for optimal performance, and configuring the cameras to achieve cinematic shots. You can find the course link in the description as well. Can you tell the difference between these two shots? And while you try to figure it out, I'll tell you what we will be covering today. We will be using both cameras as real-world creators would be using them to get different types of shots. We're gonna get some roller shots in an uncontrolled lighting environment. We will be comparing their native colors when shooting in their standard color profiles. Then we will look at the flat profile out of the X4 and compare that to the D-Log-M footage out of the Pocket 3. We will look at their image quality in different lighting conditions in both auto and manual exposure. We'll be filming in a low light situation to observe how both of their images start to deteriorate the less light we have and the higher we go on the ISO. We will test out their different resolutions in 4K 24, 4K 60, and 8K on the X4. We will look at their stabilization and how well they both do while hand-holding and walking. We will talk about their post-production workflows and what's easier when it comes to editing. We're gonna do some time lapses to see how they both hold up in different lighting environments. And then we're gonna measure their temperatures while continuously recording in 4K 60 to see how hot both cameras get. I will talk about my own personal user experience with both of these cameras. And then we'll see how that vlog frame looks while simultaneously listening to their native audio out of the native mics inside these cameras. We will be talking about which camera is for whom, and I'll be sharing side-by-side shots all along the way. The goal of this video is to give you clarity on not only what camera is right for you, but also set a contrast between how both of these cameras react in different lighting environments. All right, we have a lot to cover and look at in this video, and that's what we will be covering today on the Film Alliance. Both cameras are different and they serve different purposes. I use the X4 as a vlog camera to get some behind the scenes shots and some 360 videos. I use the Osmo Pocket 3 for more of a cinematic type of camera to get higher quality shots and also to pull it out when I was in a low light situation. But both cameras offer incredible value at low cost, especially when you compare it to the higher price cameras that are on the market today. If by the end of this video, you're still undecided about which one of these two cameras is best for you, I made a free camera quiz that may help you get on the right track, and I'll leave that quiz in the description. Let's look at what these cameras can do, their weights, when they were released, and their prices. The X4 has a 72 megapixel sensor that can shoot in 8K up to 30 frames per second and 5.7K up to 60 frames per second, and it weighs 7.2 ounces. It comes with 2 fixed lenses with different fields of view depending on what resolution you're using, and it has mind-blowing stabilization. The Osmo Pocket 3 has a 9 megapixel sensor that can shoot in 4K up to 120 and 1080 up to 240. It can shoot in D-Log-M It's lighter, coming in at 6.3 ounces. It's a fixed lens camera with mechanical stabilization, starts at $519 US, and it was released in November of 2023. The X4 starts at $499 US. It was released in April of 2024. I use both cameras extensively and really push them to their limits to figure out which one has better image quality in different lighting environments. I shot in program auto for a lot of these shots with both cameras and just let the cameras do their thing straight out of the camera. I was kind of going into it thinking of, if I was a beginner and I didn't know what I was doing, I'm gonna pull these cameras out and just go out and start filming and see what it looks like. Also, the Insta360 X4 has two different lens modes. It has a 360-degree camera which uses both lenses, and then it also has single lens camera view which only uses one of the lenses depending on which one you want to use, and it can shoot in 4K 60 and 4K 24 in those modes. For a lot of these shots, I only used single lens mode 4K 60 compared to the single lens mode on the Osmo Pocket 3, 4K 60 or 4K 24, depending on which one I was using. The Osmo Pocket 3 has a 1-inch sensor, and the Insta360 X4 has two 1/2-inch sensors for both cameras. And the Osmo Pocket 3 is a 10-bit camera, and as we mentioned before, it can shoot in 4K resolution. Now the Insta360 X4 can shoot up to 8K resolution, but it only is an 8-bit camera. So my question going into this was, does an 8K 8-bit camera work better than a 10-bit 4K camera? Let's find out. So on the face of it, you think to yourself, oh, the Insta360 can shoot in 8K, so the image quality will probably be better than the Osmo Pocket 3, but that's not what I found. I was finding when filming in bright environments where I set both cameras up to program auto, they both did about the same. But when we got into lower light environments, that's when the Osmo Pocket 3 really started to shine. If you're someone who just wants to go out and get some nice looking shots on the run, and you don't really want to spend a lot of time manually exposing your cameras, then I would say go with the Insta360 X4, because not only will you have the single lens option where you can get some pretty good looking footage at 4K 60, but you could also use the 360 camera and then reframe your shots in post-production later. And when you use that 360-degree camera, you can also shoot in 8K resolution. Just know that when you shoot in 8K, when you're using the 360-degree camera, if you decide to export that footage as a 16:9 rectangle, like what you're seeing right now, this rectangle that I'm filming in, you'll lose a lot of that resolution. In fact, I was finding that in certain lighting environments, when I knew I wanted to have that 16:9 resolution as my final export, I would just switch it over to single lens mode and shoot in 4K 24 or 4K 60 instead of shooting in 8K 360 and then scaling into that 16:9 aspect ratio in post-production. I was finding that the image quality was about the same, so it wasn't worth all of that extra media storage that I was filling up my card a lot faster by shooting in 8K and the 360-degree camera mode. Also, pretty much I have an idea of what frame I'm looking for anyways, so I don't like to just hold up my camera and then go to post-production and then try to pick a frame. Usually I set the frame in my mind up before I actually go out and start filming. But that could be different from person to person. Maybe someone's filming something like this and they want to get a front shot and then a reverse shot like a bike rider, or put the camera outside of your car, you can see front and back. But to answer the initial question between resolution and sensor size, both higher resolution and bigger sensor sizes play crucial roles in producing high quality images. The 8K resolution will make your images more sharp, and the 1-inch sensor will give you more dynamic range. So it just depends on which one of these two cameras you're hoping for. Do you want a sharper image with more room to punch in post, or do you want to have less blown out skies with the Osmo Pocket 3? It all depends on the user. When I was shooting in the normal color profile, I found that I liked the Osmo Pocket 3's look better. I felt like the colors were more realistic. Maybe that's due to the 10-bit footage rather than the 8-bit footage out of the X4. But either way, if I was shooting standalone with the Insta360 X4, I thought the colors looked really good and I wouldn't even notice a difference. When I shot with both cameras in the flat profile on the X4 and D-Log-M with the Pocket 3, I really found that the Pocket 3 footage was easier to color grade and it had a better final look to it. In my opinion, this is because there's more data in the image because it is a 10-bit camera, so I was able to push and pull my colors a lot more than I was with the 8-bit flat image. When I shot with both cameras in program auto, I thought both cameras performed about the same, unless we found ourselves in a low light environment. I did have to underexpose the X4 by -1.0 when I was out in a bright environment, whereas I only had to underexpose the Osmo Pocket 3 by -0.7, and the images were looking about the same. Also, I already mentioned when you shoot in the 360 mode with the X4, you can shoot in 8K resolution, but that's not all. You can also shoot in 5.7K and 4K. But if you take that whole cropping in consideration, like when you go into post-production and you have to scale in to get that 16:9 aspect ratio, I wouldn't shoot in the 4K resolution when I'm shooting with the 360-degree camera, because once you reframe it, the image really does fall apart. I wouldn't be surprised if you're under 1080 by the time that scaling process is done. So if you wanted to shoot in that 360-degree camera, you would have to shoot in 8K or 5.7K in order to maintain a good image quality. If you are filming in 8K or 5.7K, make sure your editing rigs can handle that footage. I know a lot of times people might buy a camera like this thinking that they're gonna go out and film a bunch of shots in 8K, and then they get home to their editing rigs and it's buffering and it's slow and it's choppy and they can't even edit their footage. So make sure whatever editing rigs you're using, it can handle that 8K footage. The downloadable files that I'm including in the description will help you with that decision before you go out and purchase this camera, because I did add 360-degree 8K video clips as a download so you can upload them to your editing rigs to make sure that your computer can handle those files. But some people do have great editing rigs, and the Insta360 is a great everyday carry camera. It's easy to use, it's portable, you can put it in your pocket, and it's waterproof. But those of you who want a better image quality for more of a cinematic looking shot and better low light performance, then I would say go with the Pocket 3. But don't take my word for it, let's jump into low light. Although the Pocket 3 is better when it comes to low light performance, I was pretty surprised on how good the Insta360 X4 did in the different ISO ranges. I shot these shots in 4K 24, in ISO 400, then ISO 800, and ISO 1600. At 1600, both cameras started to fall apart, but the X4 had way more noise and degradation in the darks, especially where we saw the lights blinking and bleeding into the frame at the dark spots. Smaller sensor cameras tend to produce more noise in the shadows because they have smaller surface area for capturing light. When there's less surface area, it's harder for the camera to gather enough light to produce a clean image. This is especially noticeable in these low light situations that you're seeing now. The larger sensor cameras like the Osmo Pocket 3 have more surface area to capture more light, so that generally produces a cleaner and less noisy image, particularly in challenging lighting environments. The Osmo Pocket 3 does have a video low light mode, but I prefer to set my own presets within the Pocket 3 and shoot in video mode. I go over my low light presets for the Pocket 3 in my course, but for now I set both cameras up to video mode and I manually exposed to see where their images started to fall apart. This is one area where the 1-inch sensor on the Osmo Pocket 3 shines over the X4. That's one of the reasons I would recommend picking up both cameras if you want the ultimate combo. Because if you're in a low light environment, you can pull out the Pocket 3, and when it's time to jump into the water or do some action shots, you can pull out the X4. I think it's the perfect travel combo. I enjoyed using both cameras for what I was doing. The Pocket 3 does have a little bit blurrier of a depth of field, and everything is in focus with the X4. So when you're filming subjects and you're hoping for a blurrier background, then I would go with the Pocket 3. But if you like everything to be in focus, that's why I would go with the X4. You do have a wider field of view with the X4, and you can change the field of view within the display. But the wider you go, the more of a fisheye look you get, more like a traditional action camera look. Whereas the Pocket 3 gives you a nice de-warped look straight out of camera, and the only way to go wider is if you add the little wide angle attachment that comes with the Creator Combo Kit. Both cameras do have active track, but the Osmo Pocket 3 has it in the camera, whereas the X4, it has to be done in post-production, and you have to film with the 360 camera in order for it to work. And if you want to track something physically around the frame, then you'll have to shoot with the 360-degree lens. The difference between both cameras when it comes to active track is the Osmo Pocket 3 could lose the track during the shot, and if that happens, you really can't do anything about it in post-production. Whereas if you're trying to track something with the X4 in post-production and it loses it, you can actually reposition the frame, use keyframes, and then continue to track it so you never lose the track. With that being said, there's more work to be done in post-production with the X4 than the Pocket 3, and that really depends on if you want to put any work into tracking your shots in post compared to getting it right in camera. Also, the Pocket 3 does not rotate 360 degrees. There are certain points on the gimbal's head where it will stop, so it can't follow something around in a circle like the X4. I really appreciated the removable battery on the X4 because the Pocket 3 does not have a removable battery, and the only way to add more power to it is to attach the extra battery that came with the Creator Combo Kit, but that does add to its form factor, size, and weight. Now, the X4 does have that removable battery, so you can buy multiple batteries and continue to swap them in and out. When I'm out in the field shooting with my cameras, I much prefer to use internal batteries rather than external batteries because they're easier to work with and you can buy multiples and just continue to swap them in and out without changing the body size and weight of the camera. When it comes to filming time lapses, both cameras did an excellent job. The X4 can shoot time lapse in 11K. But that time lapse would have to go through that Insta360's app in order to export it at that 16:9 ratio, just like we talked about already. The time lapse in the Osmo Pocket 3 puts it all together in the camera itself, and then it spits out a video clip that you can just upload right to your videos without having to do any extra editing. Now, with that being said, if you're doing a time lapse in 11K, it is nice to change up your frame while you're sitting at your computer desk rather than trying to figure out what your frame is going to be when you're out in the field shooting. Sometimes it might be off a little bit and you can change it up in post-production with the Insta360 X4. I found that super helpful. Also, I had a better experience with time lapses with the Osmo Pocket 3 because I was able to add ND filters to it. As of the time of recording this video, they don't make any ND filters for the Insta360 X4. So I had to turn my shutter speed pretty high to get some of these shots, and you don't want a high shutter speed when you're doing time lapses. Using higher shutter speeds can make the video look choppy and unnatural. This is because high shutter speeds capture less motion blur between the frames, resulting in a stuttery look. Using a slower shutter speed will create smoother motion blur between frames, producing a more pleasing and natural looking time-lapse video. That's why I love using ND filters when I'm doing a time lapse. With that being said, now that we can remove these little standard protective lens covers, it gives me hope that maybe a company is going to create ND filters for the X4, which means we'll be able to not only expose our cameras better when we're out in bright environments, but also get some better looking time lapses with the X4. A big thing for me when it comes to shooting with the X4 is I had to be very intentional about using the 360-degree camera, because when I was out filming with it, I knew I was gonna have to take extra steps in post-production once I got home to reframe and then edit the shots using waypoints in the 360 editor. I couldn't just turn it on 8K 360 and go around and just shoot a ton of stuff, because then I would have to come home to a ton of footage that I would have to go through and through the editing app before I could even export that footage maybe into my second editor, which is Final Cut Pro. I may be more of an old school type of guy where I like to offload my footage and upload it straight to my editor and just start editing it. I don't like to do any of this pre-editing stuff. That's why I don't really like Catalyst Browse when it comes to Sony cameras. I don't like to reframe my shots if I don't have to, but I guess it's a nice option with the 360, especially if you're someone who likes to get different frames after the shot. The reason I'm telling you this is because that's just my preference. It might not be yours, and that doesn't mean that that's how I'm always gonna be. Maybe in the future, I'm gonna really start to love using that 360-degree camera because it gives me more creative freedom. If someone doesn't mind the extra workflow and you can get different angles and all that kind of thing that comes with the creative nature of the 360 camera, then I would say go with the 360 camera because it's just fun. I also noticed when I exported the footage out of the Insta360 editing desktop app, the footage looked a lot better after I was done editing it and exporting it. It looked pretty grainy and noisy while I was inside the editor, and I was thinking to myself, man, what is wrong with this footage? What did I do wrong in camera? But once I exported it in the highest image quality, it looked way better. The main difference from a usability standpoint between a gimbal stabilizer camera like this and a 360 camera like this is their intended use and their functionality. The Insta360 is waterproof and it can go underwater up to 33 feet. And the Osmo Pocket 3 has mechanical stabilization because it's a gimbal stabilizer camera. The Insta360 has cameras on both sides of the body, so it can film that 360-degree view, and then it stitches together in post-production, whereas the Pocket 3, it's only gonna give you that 16:9 aspect ratio, like what you're seeing right now. This means you need to be conscious of what you're shooting with the Pocket 3, whereas the Insta360, you could just hold it up and then walk around, film everything you want, and then reframe it later in post-production to get the shots that you wanted. You can wirelessly trigger recording on the Insta360 X4, either through gestures, the mobile app, or with the Insta360 GPS preview remote. Whereas the Pocket 3, I can only record from the actual body of the Pocket 3 and the Mimo app on my smartphone. This is important because if you want to set these up in hard to reach places, you might want to know that this has gesture controls, which means if it's on the end of a long stick, you can give it a gesture control to start recording. That's pretty nice to have. Whereas when the Pocket 3 is on a long pole, I have to press record using the Mimo app. The mechanical stabilization in the Pocket 3 is better than the electronic stabilization in the Insta360 because mechanical stabilization physically moves the camera's lens to compensate for shaky hands or movements, resulting in smoother and more natural looking footage. This method provides more precise and effective stabilization, especially for unpredictable movements or when we're shooting in low light. Now there is one axis that it doesn't cover, and that's the up and down axis. So you still have to walk like a ninja when you're walking around with the Pocket 3. But the electronic stabilization on the X4, although I don't think it is as good, it relies on software to digitally correct shaky footage, which also compensates for the up and down. It can sometimes lead to a loss of image quality or a warped effect, and that's why I say I don't think it's as good. While electronic stabilization has its benefits, like here, we're shooting in a well-lit environment, I prefer the reliability and precision of the mechanical stabilization for capturing high quality and steady footage, especially when we find ourselves in low-light situations. Neither camera overheated on me in the studio test or while I was out filming with both of them at the same time in about 88 degrees. For these temperature tests, I changed both cameras' frame rate and resolution to 4K 60 frames per second. I started off at room temperature like this, and I just pressed record, and then I recorded their temperatures at various points throughout a 45-minute time span. As you can see here, at the 5-minute mark, the X4 was 6 degrees hotter than the Osmo Pocket 3, but then they stayed about the same distance apart throughout the entire 45 minutes, roughly 6 to 7 degrees hotter on the X4 than the Pocket 3. Then I was interested in how the battery would hold up on the X4 compared to the internal battery on the Osmo Pocket 3 because I thought the Insta360 X4's battery was bigger. I don't know why. I guess I just thought you couldn't fit that battery into here, so I thought it would last longer. But I was surprised to see that the Osmo Pocket 3 held a better charge and lost less battery than the X4. And next we jump down and we see the media storage burned column. As you can see, the 10-bit Osmo Pocket 3 burned more media storage than the Insta360 X4 by quite a bit. This is one of the benefits of having an 8-bit camera because you won't burn through your media as fast. But I always think I'm an image quality guy over media burn, so I would prefer the Osmo Pocket 3, even though it would burn media faster. And finally, next to that media burn, we see that we have the 8-bit 360 X4 will have more media storage on a 64GB card compared to what we get with the Pocket 3. That's another benefit to having an 8-bit camera, is you'll have more time to film with the same exact SD cards in an 8-bit camera. The Insta360 X4 can be used as a vlog camera, but I think that the Osmo Pocket 3 did a better job with its framing and skin tones. But I do think the X4 has better and more full audio when we were using the native mics, no external mics at all. Take a listen. Here's the vlog shot if I was actually just doing some type of vlog out here. I want to see what it not only looks like, but also sounds like compared to the Osmo Pocket 3. So there you go. Here's this Osmo Pocket 3 vlog shot. I want to see what it looks like in this environment. We're using the same exact settings, and I also want to check out the stabilization. This is your vlog test with the Insta360 X4. I'm in a crowded environment. I'm not using any third-party mics or external audio input. I'm using only the input from the X4, and I want to get a good idea of what it sounds like when you're in this type of environment if you were a vlogger. This is our vlog test in a crowded environment. We're seeing what the sound sounds like, looking at that frame as well, seeing how stabilized that footage is. This is what it would look like and sound like if I wasn't using any third-party mics or the DJI Mic 2 hooked up to the Osmo Pocket 3. So there's your audio test in a crowded environment. I believe that both cameras have their different use cases and they're good for different people. I prefer the Osmo Pocket 3 because I don't do many action shots, and I never find myself in a situation where I need it to go underwater. I also appreciate that 10-bit footage out of the Pocket 3 because I do find myself in places like cityscapes and lighting environments that are not as well lit as someone else who might find themselves in a super bright environment. With that said, I do think that the X4 is an amazing camera. And when they release the X5, if it's a 10-bit camera, then our image comparisons will be much closer when we compare it to the Osmo Pocket 3. But you could be way more creative with the X4, whereas the quality out of the Pocket 3 is definitely superior. But of course, everyone's style can lead to different choices. It's no wonder why the Osmo Pocket 3 is sold out everywhere and continues to go out of stock because it's so small, it's portable, and the image quality is insane. I do think that both cameras make an excellent combo, and if you can afford both cameras, it would be an excellent setup. If you can't afford both and you can only purchase one, then I would say try to figure out what you're shooting. For me, it's the Osmo Pocket 3. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm Joe with the Film Alliance, and see you in the next video.